He knew too, right? You knew you were going to marry him, and he knew too.
Yes, 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 because of course it was lunch, and he'd gone to lunch with Celine Damani, who was a former judge, husband of the sister of Ekrem Chabay. And Salim Damani was his very good friend and subsequently would become the witness at our wedding. And he said, "Who is that girl?" And Salim Damani said, "Oh, she's one of ours," because Salim Damani and my grandfather were very close. And Recep Krasniqi, who was also part of the Livizia, anyway, who was close to our family as well. They were all there and they were all talking, and they was, "Oh no, she's ours, you know. So we'll arrange this for you," kind of thing, you know. So 2 days later, they arranged that we would have dinner together, and he asked me to marry him, at least with my mother there. He spoke to my mother first. It's lovely too. That's where you play the game a little bit, because uh, he was. So the Saturday, Sunday, we'd had events were happening. I'd seen him, and it's still a lovely romantic moment because it's so Albanian, really. I was in the hall. He came out of the hall, and he saw me, and I was on the phone with my sister, and he came toward me, and I said to my sister, "Oh my God, he's walking right to me." And she said, "Turn away from him, turn away from him. Is there anyone in the hall who will see you if he talks to you?" And he came up to me, and I just put the phone down and spoke to him, you know. And he said to me, "Have you ever come to Europe?" And I said, "No, I've been to England." And he said, "Well, you should come to Europe." Stupid little things like that. But it was suddenly, I don't know. They were beautiful little things that were so charged with feeling and reserve and all those things that make those moments the most romantic moments of your life, you know. Anyway, he asked me to marry him. I married him. We didn't see each other. I became engaged. We didn't see each other for nearly 8 months, 9 months. But we began writing to each other, and only began writing to each other after the misunderstanding was cleared up, because my brother-in-law had told him when he'd asked for out my address. I didn't think to ask for his. My brother-in-law refused to give him my address. So months passed before I heard from him. There was some concern on my mother's part that this was somehow, because my mother was my mother, somehow this was going to be all a disaster, and I was going to be shamed and all the rest of it. And so I called a man whom I had a fondness for, that my father had asked to take care of us when he was dying. He knew Ibrahim Kula, he owned restaurants in Peterborough, Ontario, good man. And Ibrahim flew to Europe to figure out what is going on. And the next thing I know, I'm getting a call from Idris while Ibrahim is with him, explaining that, "Kimete, I was told not to contact you." And so, and I think that day I realized that I was in a context where I thought it was about Idris and me, but I had entered a context where suddenly people, including Idris's side, thought they had authority over me and would dictate how these things worked out and how they would move forward, that men were going to decide that. Of course, they were protecting me, but actually they were asserting their power. And so Idris and I had to work that out. And we did. We wrote to each other every single day. And once a week, we wrote a very long letter to each other.
These are all good memories, very good memories. Yeah.
Yes. I think that Idris and I revealed each other to each other through those letters. And I understood that Idris saw this union not as only a marriage of a man and a woman, but as preparation for service. he had identified in me what I didn't know myself, that I was capable of taking on a public role, and that he needed someone to do that with. He was aspiring to be a leader of the Albanian community, but he was already 40 years old, and nobody was taking him seriously, because in the patriarchy, a bachelor is as dangerous as an unmarried 20-year-old woman, right? That has no place in the society. You have to be married, to be a boor. And so he needed to be married, and he found his partner, and we had a partnership. We had, like every marriage, we had our ups and downs, we had our battlegrounds, we had things to work out, but we had incredible ability to speak the truth to each other. And I don't know why, I never feared that. So we built a partnership, and that partnership was directed not only to raising our 2 children in the context of, harmony, Idris had a capacity to dream that I learned. To realize those dreams, to make them come true, was something incredible. That man had this power to make dreams come true. But he needed me to make them come true. And we worked together. We worked really well together. So when we started in the 70s, very quickly to start organizing activities in the Albanian community. Of course, the 81 in Pristina, the demonstrations focused our work, and we began to work with Enver Hadri and others to...
You were living in Brussels?
Sorry, yeah, in Brussels, yeah. To organize demonstrations, but also to internationalize the issue, basing a lot of our work on the obligations of Yugoslavia based on the human rights agreements that, the Helsinki Parliament, European Parliament had been established, used that as a force. So, like I said earlier, we had a kind of a 3-prong approach. It was pedagogical, informational, but also influence policy. So we organized our activities. We worked really, really hard, and he saw that I was capable of helping him, and I had no complexes in public. There's one really funny occasion when we were organizing here. There were discussions here in Brussels about the situation in Kosovo. They were often, but there was a meeting, a high-level meeting, and they had organized, and they had asked me to translate a letter from English into Albanian, and then to read the letter in English at the demonstration. Well, I didn't understand why I would do that. So we're in front of these hundreds of Albanians waving their flags and, liberty and, and I get to the microphone and there's all the men, who are the speakers, they're all behind me, the men. And I said to the crowd, I said, they want me to read a letter to you in English. Do you want me to read the letter to you in English? And everybody starts laughing, right? And I said, how many of you actually speak English? And of course they're laughing. It's more fun than anything. And I said, I'm not going to speak to you in English. I'm not going to read you this letter. The letter you can get, I'll, share it. I said, here's what I'm going to say to you. And I still remember it. I got caught up in the emotion, And I said, we keep seeing each other. We've met on the streets of Bern. We've met on the streets of Frankfurt. We've met on the streets of Paris. We're now on the streets of Brussels. One day we're going to be in the streets of Pristina, walking like free men and women. And everybody went, and I, who never do this sort of thing, was doing it with them, and everybody's cheering. And Idris comes to the phone just behind me, like he said, Well, now she's killed my speech. he he enjoyed this, you know. He wasn't threatened by it. So he allowed me to express myself and become the full potential I had in me. Because in this misogynistic world that I was in, if he had not supported me, I would have been crushed.
Did you have problem with others?
Oh, a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. They try to stop you or sideline
Oh, yes.
you?
Oh, yeah. When I started working, I was told I was, you know, anything but a whore, you know. I mean, we don't send our women to work. And I had university. I wasn't going to stay home, you know, and do what?
What were you doing?
I was teaching at the International School of Brussels originally. That was my first job. And I remember I went out to look for the job in the morning. I came home with a job in the evening, you know, and everybody's saying, you're never going to get a job. You can't get a job. And I got the job. And it was a wonderful job. It helped our family a lot because it gave me a lot of freedom, and it was a community around me that supported our work. It gave me access to the elite in Belgium. And so it also opened doors that maybe would have been more difficult if I didn't have those personal connections. I earned the respect of the people at the school, not only professionally, but on a personal level. And so, for example, when we went to Albania in 1901, the whole school celebrated it. So when we began to try to support schools and other things in Kosovo and in Albania, well, in Albania first, the community came and generously supported it. So it became not only a source of my, you know, kind of professional life and support and financial stability, because it offered a very, very lucrative professional life. It also provided access, you know, to everything that might help, that could help us, you know. So yeah, I started working, but yes, I did. I encountered great barriers, you know, to the constant reminder that I was just a woman, you know, the limits of what that allowed me to do in their mind. But, you know, I don't know, I just didn't, I think when I was in the family situation, it is a conservative family, I think the worst of it was the unkindness of my sisters-in-law. But I didn't really, I didn't adjust my behavior. I made sure that I existed the way I wanted to, even though it was not easy.
So you were working, raising children,
yes,
and organizing and lobbying and advocating.
Yes, I did it all. I did it all, and I did it, and I was energized by it. I was tired sometimes, but not really. Yeah, I did it all, and I did it after at a certain point. Idris was working less because he wanted to be, you know, especially after 1990, right? It was more Albania and Kosovo than, you know, psychoanalysis. So financially it became a burden, which I carried primarily on my own for the family. But by that time we had paid off our apartment and there were less, but still it was difficult sometimes. I joke about it that after Idris died and I sold the apartment, because my daughters had gone. One was living in England, one was living in Portugal. I had this huge apartment. It was costing more than it was providing. So I decided a year after he died, I was going to get rid of it. I was also going to just keep living and live indifferently. But to do that, I had to sell the apartment because I needed to have financial stability. So I sold it. And I joke about that it was the first time in my life that I didn't have to worry at the end of the month. You know, that finally I could be free. You know? I had no emotional connections like this. You know, I didn't guilt myself for saying I wanted to live differently. I was a widow, and I think I've honored my husband since he passed away. I've worked very, very hard. to protect his legacy and to honor our partnership, because I exist in that story too. But I will not be a prisoner of grief, and I will not be a prisoner of people's expectations of the Albanian widow. I will not do it.
And certainly not prisoner of an apartment, since you have been traveling all your life and been moving around.
Yes, it's a thing, isn't it? It's nothing, it's a thing. That's also something that I think is fundamental in me. Sometimes my children don't understand it. But I never owned anything. Nothing was mine as a child. Nothing. Nothing was mine. And so I don't really, I created an environment that I think reflects me. I'm comfortable, I think it's welcoming, and I think there's beauty here. But I don't really care about things. You know, I really don't. It's very hard. The only things I don't give away are gifts that people have given me. I respect gifts. But it's a joke. My daughter said, don't tell her you like it because she'll give it to you. Because if you said to me, oh, I love that, I said, would you like it? I don't own things. It's funny. I feel that I'm just a caretaker of things.
Don't tell me, because there are a few things I like.
No, I'm a caretaker. Because it's part of my growing up.
Listen, I want to ask you, because you were talking about all these activities, how did you live through the Kosovo War? When the war started, how did you live through the Kosovo War? How did you experience it? Because you were away. I don't know if you had relatives there
no, I have no relatives that I know of. Well, Idris was at the embassy then. He was representing Albania. He was Albania's ambassador during the war. And that created a conflict because the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Pascal Milo, was primarily concerned with establishing in Europe credibility for the Socialist Party in Albania at the time. His priority was not Kosovo. And Idris felt that the Albanian government should make it priority. He felt that it was a historical betrayal that had happened before under Hoxha, and that it was happening again. And I think incorrectly, he had assumed that at the embassy, as an ambassador, he would be able to defend the Kosovar cause more effectively. In fact, he realized that the embassy had created barriers to the freedom to speak. So he began to write and publish on a personal level. I could say, like, this is not the ambassador, this is Idris Basha. And that created more and more conflict with the government, and finally led to our decision to leave the embassy, which they actually, in a very cynical way, did not acknowledge. And then they sent a fax unsigned to say that he'd been removed. You know, it was a terrible time. Dishonesty, you know, petty politics, you know. But how did I live through that period? I lived with great suffering. I really felt deeply. I worked, you know, one of the advantages of being the wife of the ambassador at the time was that it gave me access to the Red Cross, Médecins Sans Frontières. I worked with all these organizations to do something or to try to help. I couldn't help directly in Kosovo, but I could do something about the people that were streaming into Belgium and France. And so I worked with those organizations. I tried to organize activities for the women in the camps. We made, I know it sounds like a little thing, but it was a day of jubilation in the time of suffering. We organized for the children.